So in this example, for every $87.50, you would only be paying $1.40. Incredible. Hello world, thanks for joining me today. My name is Mickey and I am on a homestead journey. I live here in the great state of Texas with my dog Buckshot, and today I want to talk to you about what a lot of people call an ag exemption. It's really an agricultural valuation of your land rather than using a commercial valuation like you would for regular real estate. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know that I don't yet have property, so I'm doing all that I can to learn about the process of buying property, how to find the right land, how to plant things, all the things that are related to the skills of homesteading. I'll be referencing information from Texas today, but note that tax evaluations are different between states and also within a state between counties. So I am hoping to buy property in the Texas Hill Country, as you may have seen in one of my previous videos. In particular, I've been looking in Gillespie County, which is west of Austin. The county next to it, between Gillespie County and the city of Austin, is Blanco County, and I'll be referencing some information from it as well. So here in Texas, in 1966, voters approved the first agricultural appraisal law for ad valorem, which is Latin for according to value. It's a way of assessing taxes based on the value of the agricultural use of property rather than the commercial value, sale price, you might say. The first law, known as 1D, intended to protect the family farm from being taxed out of existence as Texas became more urbanized and market price of agricultural land steadily rose. Section 1D was very restrictive, though, and applies only to landowners with their primary occupation being agriculture. As Texas became more urbanized and the number of agricultural producers began to drop, a new section was added to the Texas Constitution by voters in 1978. It was called Section 1D1 and substantially expanded the eligibility for productivity appraisal by individuals as well as corporations. Income and primary occupation did not apply under 1D1. And also in 1996, wildlife management use was added as a subsection of 1D1, which allows the management of native species using state guidelines as a qualification for productivity value. Now, agricultural appraisal applies only to land. Only to acreage that is used in the agricultural operation may qualify for agricultural use valuation. Improvements such as buildings, barns, homes, silos, all those are appraised separately at market value. Agricultural products like the livestock and the fruit and vegetables and grains in the hands of producers are generally exempt from taxation due to other provisions in the Texas Constitution. Also, farm and ranch machinery and equipment that are used in the production of farm or ranch products are exempt. Some man-made alterations or additions to the agricultural land, fences, canals, water wells, roads, are valued as part of the land and not separately appraised. So owners wishing to receive a special agricultural valuation on their land must show the chief appraiser that the land meets the standards for agricultural appraisal. And those standards include primary use. These are basically the tests that are a part of the valuation. Primary use, current use, intensity, and time period test. Some of these requirements, again, differ from county to county, so make sure that you check with your county assessor's office. It's up to you to ensure that the information is accurate and that you're following all of the guidelines that your county tax assessor has applied. So again, the burden of proof is on the responsibility of the landowner. It's up to you. So let's talk about the time period test. Land must have been used principally for the agricultural use that you're petitioning for 5 years of the previous 7 preceding your application. There are some minor exceptions if you're still trying to develop and you weren't fully implemented the consecutive 5 years out of the 7. You can work with your county assessor's office and determine whether that will work for you. As long as the agriculture was the principal use of the land in the preceding years and the land qualifies, even if the agricultural use did not meet the degree of intensity requirements for all or part of those preceding years, you can get approved. So then there's the current use test. So the land must be an agricultural use as of January 1st of the tax year. In the event that agricultural use is not evident on January 1st, the chief appraiser will grant agricultural use only if the owner can show evidence that they intend to put the land into agricultural use and that agricultural use will be the primary use of the land for the bulk of the calendar year covering the application. So basically it's saying that you're coming into the new year stating that you're raising cattle, and in the event you don't have all the cattle on the property, if you can show proof that you bought them and they're coming, there's some evidence that you can show the chief appraiser, they will, and that the bulk of the year will be covered for what you're applying for, they'll likely approve it. So next is the primary use test. According to the statute, land must be devoted principally to the agricultural use. So if the land is used for more than one purpose, the most important or primary use must be agricultural. So for example, pleasure gardening isn't the principal use of residential land, nor is livestock grazing the principal use of residential tracts. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Now it's up to the chief appraiser to determine what the primary use is. So you really want to make sure that it's evident what the primary use is and very clear. Another test performed by the assessor will be the intensity of use test. It measures whether the land is being farmed or ranched to the extent typical for agricultural operations. To receive a productivity appraisal, the land must be used to the degree of intensity typical in the area as defined by the chief appraiser and the Agriculture Advisory Board. This test is intended to exclude land on which token agricultural uses occur in an effort to obtain tax relief. So they're trying to catch you if you have, say, a couple of goats on your property and they run around and eat up all the bramble and then you ship them off the next month. That's just not going to pass for the intensity test. And the intensity test comes with some requirements for example, the number of head of cattle on a property. Note it talks about the chief appraiser and the Agriculture Advisory Board who define what the typical intensity is for your area. So this is one of those things that varies from county by county, and we'll talk about this in a moment when we start talking about raising cattle, for example. You have to have a certain number of head on the amount of acreage that you have that is typical for the area, so that they know that you're not taking advantage of their tax relief program. And of course there's an application that you have to fill out. Property owner claiming that their land is eligible for special appraisal through the agricultural use must file a valid application with the appraisal district. The application must be filed before May 1st. I think everybody's tax season ends in April for the most part, and must be filed with the chief appraiser of the appraisal district where the property is located. So that means if your tract of land crosses the county line, you would have to file in both counties. Of course, it's important for you to file on time. If you're late, like in most things, you'll get a fine. Or if you've had a previous Ag Valuation and you file late, you could lose it. So Let's talk about the types of agricultural operations. Again, the whole idea here is to commercialize this property, whether it's raising animals for meat or for fiber, or you're growing food. You know, the idea here is that you're commercializing it. So the first is livestock operations. Livestock operations raise and keep cattle, sheep, goats. Operations can be described as cow and calf operations, cattle stockers, feed operations, sheep operations for meat, wool production, you know, all those standard things you do with raising a herd. Now again, I'm referencing Gillespie County, and the livestock operations in Gillespie County appraisal district jurisdictions must have a minimum of 2 animal units of animals. Now, an animal unit defines how many of a certain type of animal you have to have on a property to meet the standard usage for a property. You know, it's one of these regulations that, or one of these requirements that helps them define whether you're meeting the regulation or not. So let me take a minute to talk about animal units. They're defined county by county. There are some differences here and there that I've found, but basically in Gillespie County, a cow is 1 animal unit. A mature bull is 1.25 units. And the way that they define this is basically across the state, 1,000 pounds of live animal weight equals 1 animal unit. So a horse is 1.25 units like a mature bull. A buck elk is 1 unit. When it comes to goats, 5 billy goats or bucks is 1 unit. So it takes 5 billy goats to make 1 animal unit. 6 alpacas, we have a lot of alpacas in Texas, 6 alpacas equals 1 animal unit. So again, this is helping define on so many acres how many animals do you have to define that you're meeting the commercialization of that property for whatever your agricultural use may be. Now for livestock operations, generally it's 25 acres. I don't see a whole lot of variance from county to county. There are some, but essentially we're talking about 20 to 25 acres at a minimum, with 1 animal unit for the most part. Sometimes there are some differences. They might call for 2 animal units depending on what type of animal you're raising. Another is equine operations, and the minimum operation is 2 animal units unless there's a lot more land. Basically, the primary use is raising, breeding, and or grazing horses for farm and ranch purposes. Land used to train, show, or race horses, or to ride for recreation, or keeping them in some other manner that is not strictly incidental to breeding or raising horses or using horses for farm and ranching purposes like plowing, does not qualify for agricultural use. Exotic animals is also an agricultural use possibility in the great state of Texas. Verification of commercial use is required to qualify for agricultural use valuation with exotic animals. Things like hunting are not considered a commercial product of exotics, so it's considered a recreational activity. So hunting is not going to cut it. This type of operation, depending on the species of animal, usually requires a deer-proof high fence. So this is one of the additional restrictions that will be required for having an exotic animal valuation. There are other types of agricultural use valuations that have additional things you would have to get approved for the valuation. But in this case, a deer-proof high fence is one for exotic animals. May be quite expensive, I don't know. The exotic animal minimum of 2 animal units as the requirement for qualification. So looking at the list, I see that some exotic animals listed are it's 2 scimitar horned oryx equals 1 animal unit. 5 axis deer equals 1 animal unit. Another one available in Gillespie County and I believe across Texas is beekeeping operations. The state of Texas limits beekeeping to areas not less than 5 acres and not more than 20 acres. The minimum use for intensity is 6 colonies in 5 acres for Gillespie County. The next county over, I mentioned closer to Austin, is Blanco County, and there 5 acres only requires 3 colonies. So there are some differences there. In Gillespie County, for every additional 2.5 acres of land, an additional hive is required. So if a landowner wanted to qualify 20 acres through beekeeping, then a minimum of 12 colonies is required. And the hives must be active and must be located on the property for a minimum of 7 months a year. So to compare and contrast, in Blanco County, the Agricultural Advisory Board met in October of 2014 and determined that for land greater than 5 acres but less than 20 acres, you only have to have 3 beehives. So it's quite a bit less. But the property owners shall provide to the office annually a bill of sale for the queens. So you're going to have to do some negotiation if you're capturing your own hives and not buying queens. Also, property owners should also fill out a registration application with the Apiary Inspection Service and include that with their application. And you don't have that in Gillespie County as well, so that might save me a little money. Also in Blanco County, property owners should include a landscape plan for the property that shows hive placement and indicates how different plants and plans for the future planting will appear on the land. It says, please include how this would contribute to the bees foraging and where fruit trees, shrubs, vines, flowers, clover, buckwheat, etc. are placed on your land, and include a map of the property. Now, property owners are also asked to provide a basic marketing plan on how honey and related products such as beeswax, candles, soap, etc. would be sold. So again, Blanco County there is asking you to show proof that you're going to be commercializing and making money from your beehives. So getting back to Gillespie County, Cropland Operations is another agricultural use. Cropland in Gillespie County's appraisal district jurisdiction requires supplemental fertilization and is usually a part of the typical farming operation. So there's going to be some extra costs for cropland operations. Much of the land that is not irrigated is grazed during part of the year, usually during winter months. Small grain and sorghum hay operators will normally plant their fields on an annual basis and combine the grain or bale hay for at least one cutting. Landowners should follow the practices that are typical for land in Gillespie County Appraisal District jurisdiction. A typical size field in Gillespie County jurisdiction has a minimum of 5 acres. So for growing hay, you can have 5 acres plus 1 for your house, because of course your house isn't going to be part of the hay sales commercial use. So you'd have 6 acres. You'd use 5 of that to grow hay and sell the bales, and you could also use it for grazing. But again, see, there's this discussion about typical practices, so that's up to the county assessor and some agricultural board to give you some details on exactly what they might require county to county. And the town of Fredericksburg sits in Gillespie County, and they call that part of the hill country, the Texas wine country. So orchards and vineyard operations are a big agricultural use. These operations are in the business of cultivating trees or grapevines that produce nuts or fruit, such as pecans, peaches, and grapes, which are sold commercially. We have some great peaches in Fredericksburg. They're known all around the state. Not sure about outside the state, but everybody in Texas knows Fredericksburg peaches. Fredericksburg peaches are the best. Typically, these operations have a regular schedule of pruning, spraying, and cultivation, as well as keeping the area around the trees or vines mowed or disked. A typical size orchard or vineyard in Gillespie County Appraisal District jurisdiction has a minimum of 3 acres. So here the land size restriction is smaller. You only need 3 acres. But some of these things about pruning, spraying, cultivating, yes. And, maybe mowing, probably not disked, and spraying. Those two things don't kind of meet up with the permaculture concept. So these may be things that you're going to have to work out with the county appraiser. Another one that's a little unique to Gillespie County is truck farming operations. This type of operation is in the business of cultivating the soil for planting vegetables. This type of operation depends on a good source of water for irrigation. It is typical for this type of operation to utilize some type of irrigation system. There are some crops, such as okra, that do well in dry climates and may not require irrigation. So each operation should be considered separately. So they're kind of giving you some opportunity to have the county assessor look at each property, each request uniquely. Examples of crops grown in truck farming operations include tomatoes, squash, potatoes, peppers, and carrots, and of course okra. A minimum size of 3 acres is considered typical for this type of operation in Gillespie County jurisdiction. Another opportunity is wildlife management operations. Wildlife management may qualify your land for the agricultural use valuation. Tract of land can qualify for agricultural appraisal based on wildlife management use if the land's primary use of the tract of land is wildlife management, if it's already qualified for open space land. So you would have already had to have some sort of agricultural valuation to be able to convert over to wildlife management operations. In each year for which the owner seeks to qualify the tract for wildlife management use, the landowner has selected at least 3 wildlife management practices, and using wildlife management activities has implemented each of the selected practices to the degree of intensity required. And there's a list here: habitat control, erosion control, predator control, providing supplemental water, providing supplemental food, providing shelter, or making a census count to determine the population. So you have to do 3 of those out of the list of 7 here in any given year to qualify. And the landowner manages indigenous wildlife for human use. So again, they're kind of talking about the commercialization. The tract of land meets the 20-acre minimum tract size if applicable. So in general, you're going to have a 20-acre tract to have wildlife management operations. Although my assumption is that if you had an orchard or a vineyard on 3 acres, you're already approved for the ag use, then you could convert to wildlife management and still have less than 20 acres. One additional thing to note is that in addition to the 1D1 agricultural use application, a state wildlife management plan has to be submitted. So that you would have to work with the Texas Parks and Wildlife to have that plan put together, management plan, and then submitted with your application to the county assessor's office. Another option in Gillespie County is a government program operations. I haven't seen this in any other counties that I've been looking in, and I've looked over 6, I believe it's 6. In this case, these programs include the Conservation Reserve Program, CRP, the Continuous Conservation Reserve Program, CCRP, and the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, EQIP. Other governmental programs such as brush or cedar control are normal and prudent ranch management practices, and these programs don't qualify for the land or agriculture evaluation on their own. So basically what they're saying is cedar and yaupon grow in the hill country of Texas, and it's just standard land management good practice for you to keep those under control because they're invasive. So they don't qualify for the government land management program. Additionally, in Gillespie County, there is the land lease agricultural valuation. Leases are an applicable agricultural use for the owner of the property, provided the leasee is using the land to the standards of agricultural use for Gillespie County Appraisal District, and the leasee has enough contiguous land, it's important, contiguous land, either owned or leased, to suffice the minimum standard size. An owner applying for agricultural use valuation using a lease agreement needs to include with the application a copy of the lease of a written lease if used, or if it's an oral agreement in place, then the leasee needs to provide a letter stating the kind of agricultural use, the number of livestock run on the property or acres planted during the lease, and contact information of the leasee. So basically, if your neighbor has cattle and leases part of your property for grazing, then you can still take advantage of the agricultural valuation by including the lease agreement and the information from your neighbor whose cattle is grazing on your property. So one thing we haven't talked about is how much savings are you going to get? And of course it varies from county to county because the property taxes in Texas are assessed by each county with different ratings. Harris County, for example, which covers the Houston area, is really high, where I live in another county just outside, and my taxes are probably only 2/3 of what they are in Harris County, maybe even half. But here as an example for Gillespie County, it talks about 1 acre of land has a market value of $5,000 and an agricultural productivity value of $80, and the cumulative tax rate is $1.75 per $100 of valuation. So what that means is taxes for 1 acre of land at market value would be $5,000 times $1.75 for every $100. That would be $87.50. Taxes for 1 acre of land at agricultural productivity value is $80 times $1.75 for every $100 value equals $1.40. So in this example, for every $87.50, you would only be paying $1.40. Incredible. So that's it for this one. I hope you got something valuable out of it. I did by doing the research. I really think that I will be planting okra on a part of my property and raising bees, and hopefully I will get a significant discount in my property taxes as well. So thank you for joining me. I hope you'll subscribe and give this video the thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Tell me about your homesteading adventure. Tell me about your agricultural use evaluations in your county or your state. How do you get tax breaks for your homestead? I'd really like to know. And don't forget, happiness is the new wealth. You ready to go? Tell me. Tell me. You're awesome.